Deleted session, November 6, 1971. Now, good evening. We will start slowly. Much of what you discussed today was discussed by me a good deal of time ago. Rob said, true. They said, the suggestions I made at that time were not followed. Others were not, for both of your reasons, because the situation served both of your purposes to some extent. Because now you fear that the situation may become a way of life, you are finally both willing to take more direct action. To some degree, you have both been avoiding each other. You made a pact not to discuss troublesome, frightening, or critical problems, particularly those which did not seem to have an immediate solution. You avoided meaningful emotional encounters with each other, often as a result. Neither of your ideas were tempered by the ideas of the other. Therefore, nor were your feelings about these life problems. The rich emotional contact and encounters that are possible between you became clogged by inhibition and fears. Because of his particular nature, these agreements on your part to avoid such issues and the resulting lack of positive encounters was more damaging to Ruber. You obviously also suffered. However, bringing such matters to the surface serves many more purposes than is apparent. Therefore, it means that you refuse to let old habits any longer rule, and each such encounter is an exercise in learning how to express and communicate your feelings each to the other. This will automatically break down some projections, clear the air, but more than this, the repressed energy being used to prevent communication, open communication, is physically and psychically released. Robert was correct that in those statements he made last evening, having to do with the balance of routine and spontaneity, for his nature does need both. So does yours. Incidentally, though this is not nearly as apparent. You were not living clearly in the central, physical world, in that large amounts of energy were being used to replace physical communication. You went to some good degree toward breaking some of those patterns last evening and today. But the issues of your lives should be clearly discussed and not hidden. The problems were being taken out of the physical realm, where you could indeed handle them, into a mental realm, where you tried to hide them. I am speaking now of you both. You did not communicate your concern to each other. Therefore, you did not communicate your hopes. You, now, did for some time get into the habit of non-smiling, which led Ruber to further reinforce his own negative ideas of what you are thinking. But all of the symptoms now represent aspects of your lives that you have not faced in normal above-the-board fashion. It is not so much that you have not solved them, as that you let communication about them gradually fade away. Ruber can be far more helpful than you realize in helping with those solutions. Your lives in many ways did not satisfy you, but rather than accept this fact clearly and cast about for what changes or solutions there might be, both of you tried to keep everything precisely as it was, make no changes, and live with the dissatisfaction that became a constant inner problem. It naturally reflected all of your own attitudes, the similar and various ways the both of you have of facing reality. So, when you discuss it, the problem becomes an excellent focal point, showing you how you interact, how you interpret and misinterpret each other, and brings out quite clearly any basic conflicts that you have. In other words, such discussions are excellent methods of showing you how you interrelate. They provide miniature yet perfect therapeutic sessions, besides having the advantage of bringing the initial problems to the front where you can deal with them together. Before you nursed these separately and felt both of you overburdened at times and misunderstood by the other. Such a discussion also serves to force Ruber to say what he thinks, clarifies his own feelings, for he is not used to vocalizing them. Doing this alone can help him understand them more clearly. Aggression or fear may rise up. If so, face those feelings honestly, for they have been backed up within you. All of these serve to clear the air, opening the channels of communication, so that you do not have to be wondering what the other one is up to now. The breaking of schedules is extremely beneficial for you also and would have made your outside job less burdensome in the past. It serves to give you a feeling of freedom and open the way to unstructured emotional release. This, with the information given in the last session, if followed, can help you greatly and clear Ruber's symptoms, but not if the advice is not followed. You may take your break. Now, to the both of you, unconsciously, an emotional encounter means an encounter with unpleasant emotions. You have both done a good job of hiding your emotions from each other, even more than your thoughts. Reasons have been given to you in the past, but you can break the habit now by expressing your emotions to each other, and so indeed you must. One of the deep disappointments that neither of you have faced is the difference between what your personal relationship is and what it could and should be. Your relationship is a good one, compared to most an excellent one, but you know your inner potentials and the potentials of that relationship, and how much you have to some degree failed it. Obviously, you have not entirely failed by any means, and you have always maintained an underground basis of reality and love. But you are each deeply disappointed with that relationship compared to what you know it can be. The sexual aspect is but a symptom of this. You were both afraid in varying degrees of emotional contact of a strong nature. In the early days or years of your relationship, these patterns were submerged largely. Your tendency to avoid such encounters was much more apparent then than Ruber's. Your habits both became extremely sloppy in that regard, and it was easy for both of you to justify the lack of increasingly rewarding emotional interaction by saying it went into your separate work and into our work. As repressions built up, then emotional encounters did seem to be unpleasant, for only when one of you became thoroughly uncomfortable and desperate did you really open emotionally to the other. It is testament to the strength of your love and mutual commitment that you did not run into far greater problems. Now, Robert took this out physically and blocked emotions, not from the distant past but a current life habit. Now shows these blocked emotions. Again, he suffers more from the lack of rich emotional interaction than you. He is less able to take it. Whenever you begin to interact, often the negative emotions show first. Each of you become frightened and clap a lid down upon the whole affair. Robert shows some improvement and then goes back until you try again. Your relationship and your lives in general, you see, follow certain definite patterns set by you. Your work and your relationship are interwoven. You have not allowed yourself the leeway or the excuses either that people do with families or a large number of interests. If you do not find emotional satisfaction with each other, you do not find it. In other words, the whole problem, however, involves your work also, and solving one problem solves the other. Finding release in one gives you release in the other. And both of you chose, therefore, a life situation and framework in which precisely those problems you have tried to ignore should serve as challenges and impetuses. You have not given each other, now, the ever-growing, ever more rewarding emotional interactions and encounters that you need as individuals and as creators. You can break the pattern then, at any time. This should help you do so by present, current action. Often you are so involved with feelings you had in the past that you do not know what you are feeling in the present. There are richly creative emotional funds within you both. Each of you know this and sense it. You would do far better by trying to bring this out into the open on your own part and encourage them on the part of your mate. The angers or aggressions or misunderstandings, when you let them out and discuss them and feel them, you try to be, both of you, too mental and intellectual about your emotions, thinking them away if possible rather than freely admitting them. Now, that disappointment with your relationship is even more pertinent than your individual and joint feelings about artistic and your life in that regard. That aspect of your life would simply be another challenge for the two of you to face together if you admitted this deeper disappointment and did something about it. Robert is again far better able to help you in that regard than either of you realize. The basic disappointment with each other colors your perspective when you consider the artistic core aspect. Now, I am telling you this. Robert is emotionally deprived, and that is what his physical body does when it knows it. He managed to go ahead creatively despite this, though a great difficulty. Your symptoms lay in a different area, and I am sure you know where. They show up in your creative work, for otherwise, you would have been far freer. Your creative work, therefore, shows the emotional depriving aspects. You have not been able to let yourself go fully in them, as Robert has not been able to go freely with his body. Now, this is the basic problem. The basic reasons for both Robert's symptoms and hold back in your own work, and the answer to both lies in learning how to release yourselves to yourselves, to let your own emotional natures relate to each other. You must go over the hump, therefore, of being afraid of your emotions, both of you. The show of any emotional between you should be considered an advance. You will soon find joy and spontaneity, therefore, quite automatically and freely. Now, you may take your break. And I have told you why you have not succeeded in the past, either of you, and why you can now. Now, in your relationship, you inhibited the expression of joyful and loving emotions first. You were not afraid as much of negative emotions, briefly, because in your family, your father found safety in negative emotions. By the denial of hope and the inhibition of joyful emotions, he tried to protect himself against disappointment or defeat. If he did not expect much, there was nothing he could lose. Do you follow me? Ralph said, yes. Say said, the same feeling often pervades your own attitude when you think of Rupert's symptoms. You think you are being realistic. You are instead giving into old patterns of emotion, and you can break this habit. You are afraid then not of the negative emotional release, which means, to the degree mentioned, safety, but of the joyful loving emotions. Part of this had to do with your father's disappointment in business and his reaction to it. Part of it had to do with your distrust of such emotion when it was displayed by your mother. You felt it could be smothering, for you sensed the reasons behind her smothering love for her sons. When you begin to sense you might be getting somewhere, then you become suspicious instantly. Inhibit the feeling in the name of realism. Now, Rupert inhibited the negative emotions, so-called first of all, because of his own background, the fear of arguments, of hurting someone, as explained clearly in other sessions. The end result, however, on both of your parts was the inhibition of emotional expression in your relationship, precisely in those most important areas where it was most needed. Gradually, he inhibited the love and the joy, and you the negatives until your lives lacked those nature rises and falls in feelings in tone. You set yourself against your feelings, allowing them release in certain areas only under certain conditions, and in largely impersonal as opposed to intimate areas. You related in terms of your work, or our work, or as a couple with others. Now, resentment against each other grew. Many would be far more than satisfied with your relationship, but you set yourself high goals, both in your work and in your personal lifelong relationship with each other, and you suffer when you are not true to this. You do not look at each other freshly. You cannot extend your feelings, though you think you do, because you do not honestly come to grips with them, nor express them. As far as the relationship is concerned, you face each other distantly. Out of the potential relationship interactions are possible that will make great changes in your lives, your individual work, and our work. You must forget the ideas you have about each other and look at the living emotional self upon which you have built and projected. Robert helped your work, the artistic core aspect, and all others will fall into line. Now, this session was not practically possible until each of you were ready to hear it. For these facts were made on both of your parts. There is no other answer. The entire affair must be considered as a creative emotional venture and challenge. You are both indeed lucky, for you do have a firm basis from which to work. It is not that you do not have an ideal in-course relationship, but you had lost that feeling of the potentials within you. Your relationship falls so far below those standards, and you are so closely bound together, that his would show in all areas. All sessions, both of your creative works, the good you have done and are doing, the health that you have maintained. No serious organic defects. All of this is testament to what you have done. Now, unless you have questions, I will end the session, and there are no other reasons. I said, well, I guess for the first time, I don't feel there's still something about the situation that we don't know. They said, neither of you would have been willing to do the work required earlier. That said, all right, thank you very much, Seth, and good night. They said, and it was still a creative endeavor. That said, I understand. They said, one footnote to make sure you understand. You hid your want from each other, and denied each other the life-giving, rich emotional interaction that you need as individuals and as creators. You obviously did not completely do this, or the affair would be far worse. You no longer made each other laugh or cry. Do you follow me? Love said, oh yes. Good night, Seth.